when I was not approached, a few of us were sitting around a bar at Heinz Niethling's father's place in South Africa last October, where Tara and myself and Bill's been there a few times, and some of the others in the room have been. And they said, "Have you heard from Jill Morris?" I went, "Well, I've gotten a couple emails. I sent in a proposal. I haven't heard about that yet." She says, "Well, we're inviting you to be the keynote." I've been involved with this organization for a long time, and I've submitted the idea of me being a keynote, and it fell on deaf ears. And then when I stopped, they asked me. Go figure. All right. I'm a visual person. I was born with a cleft palate. I was not able to speak basically in a way and being understood to after the age of 6 when the surgery was finished. But I was drawing by the age of 2. My mother understood me. The same operations now can be done in a matter of a few hours. The expertise has vastly increased since the 1940s. But I was always a visual person. When I traveled in Europe and ran into 18 different languages, it's when I finally said, "Take out your journal, stupid, and draw a picture." And no problems, anywhere. We've been around for a long time. The organization's been 22 years. This is the 21st conference, if I got the numbers right. Those are the cities for those who have good eyes. And for those of you who are obsessed with reading the Zen of presentation, yes, I have committed probably half a dozen sins in the world of visual aids. Creativity, a gift at birth, but it is a daily choice. You choose to be creative. You're not just creative. You ask a writer, you ask a poet, you ask a sculptor, you ask a photographer, why do you do what you do? And the answer is always, that's what I do. They never think of themselves generally as creative. They just who they are. Until I met someone, I'm going to tell you a little bit more of the story. Here's what I do when I get up in the morning, is to see the world for what it can be. The old Kennedy comment, I believe, who he borrowed from a few other people. Some people ask why. I ask why not. I ask what else. What else can we do? Or sometimes, like now with the recession, what can we do without? Conformity, unfortunately, is what we end up with. That photograph of people running a marathon, to me, doesn't show a lot of individuality. It's a bunch of conformity, like our roads, like our neighborhoods. When I fly in over cities or towns anywhere in the United States and look down, having been trained as an architect and a planner, and go, my God, is that really what we did? Of how badly done Levittown was. For those of you from the Philly area, you know what I mean, or Fairless Hills, where my relatives lived. Yeah, we needed houses, and we got them. You either got the left-hand red door or the right-hand red door, or maybe the green door. Where was the creativity? I've seen more creativity in a typical Singapore food court than I've seen in most of the cities in the United States. That's my name and my company. It only took me a few years of my 50 years of working to finally come up with a company name that made sense. Creating people, places, and possibilities. But when I was asked that I was told that I was going to be a keynote, I thought, all right, what will I talk about? And I went off to Asia for 3 weeks on things I already had planned and thought about, took time each day, an hour or so, trying to come up with ideas and concepts. What would I talk about? I didn't want to talk about what I normally talk about in a workshop. Didn't want to do it like a workshop, because this is not a workshop. This is a keynote address. And 20 years ago, that's how I made my living. until I decided that's not how I wanted to make my living. To spend 6 months to find one client. And 10 minutes after you're done and you're waiting for the limo in the front of the hotel and they don't remember what your name is, didn't give me the lasting impact I wanted. But this man inspired millions and will inspire millions for many years to come, thanks to YouTube and thanks to the book that's indicated in the left-hand corner. Randy Pausch. At a lot of universities, as he points out in his last lecture, have this custom of the last lecture, as if this was the last one you would ever give. What would you share? And he thought about it a lot, but it was more significant to him, if you don't know the story, because he had just found out he had pancreatic cancer, and he had maybe 6 months to live. But in the book, he tells the story. I read the book as one of the motivators for me to really feel up to what I was going to do. And I went, been there, done that, been there, done that, been there, done that. And he says in one comment, he says, I worked on it for almost a year. The first 3 months, I had to fight my wife into agreeing to letting me do it because he had limited days. And they had 3 young children. She wanted him with her and them. He wanted to be with her and them. But he said, there's something about this. I need to do it. But then towards after, he goes through the book and he says, they introduced me, and just before they introduced me, I'm up at the podium playing with my PowerPoint. Taking slides out, putting slides in, taking slides out, checking the camera. Where do you think I was at 3 o'clock this afternoon? I was arguing with Jonathan, the prize winner, and Lynn Krause. No, the damn cord can't be the problem. It's got to be that damn print LCD. And he finally gave up on my accepting it, and he just went, and she went over and went, see, it was the cord. Anyway, phenomenal man. Read the story. Watch the last lecture on YouTube. There's never a dry eye when people watch it. I show it to police officers, and they get the message. This is a man that knew he had bad habits when he was 5 years younger than that. He knew he was despicable in many ways, but he found something he loved, and he focused his life on it, along with a woman that he loved passionately. And by the way, he gave the last lecture on her birthday. 1950, in an APA meeting, the then president, J.P. Guilford, in his address, made this statement. The subject of creativity has been neglected by psychologists, and he challenged his profession to start doing research. That was in 1950. I met him in 1978. He was sitting next to me in the home base for gifted education at SIPSI. Everyone else sitting around the U-shape, like you are, Boris, basically, were, okay, here's Dorothy Sisk, here's Dory Shellcross, here's Paul and Pansy Torrance, here's Irwin this, and I had read these people's books. I was the nobody in the room. I wasn't even a doctoral student yet. I hadn't been officially accepted yet. And then I saw this elderly gentleman sitting next to me. And I saw his name tag, and it said J.P. I knew who that was. So I turned towards him, and I said as politely as I possibly could, Dr. Guilford, may I ask you a question? And unlike Jonathan Vihar or John Pearson, he didn't come back with, you just did. Instead, what he did was he turned towards me with his right hand, laying it lightly on my left arm, and said, please call me JP. We're at SIPSI. Or if it was here, it was, I'm JP. We're at ACA. That told me what I was about to experience for the next 30 years of my life. Creativity, a gift at birth, yet it needs, this is kind of a mind map of what I'm about to do. 60 years later, though, I ask this question, which is what the premise of this presentation is. Is the subject of creativity that much more a part of our lives today? For the people in this room, yes, it is. But to the world in general, no. I've been all over the world, 77 countries to date, 49 out of the 50 states, 7 out of the 11 or 12 provinces of Canada, pitching my pitch. We're all creative. What are you doing about it? The four P's of creativity. Don't remember the person, and I'll let the master's graduates tell me who the name of the person who said that was, because I've challenged it ever since I first read it. The word press was used for environment. I'm an architect, a licensed architect in several states. I'm also an interior designer, a spatial designer, and I would never use the word press to represent environment. And besides, I don't talk about the physical environment as much as I do about the psychological, the social, and the emotional, and the virtual environment. But all four. But the one that's important to me is the one that's on the screen right now. It just took me 65.5 years to realize that. 34 years I've been at this, 130 different creativity conferences I've presented at. Some of them are cheating, and 30 of them were SIPSEs, and 20 were this, and 10 were this. But that's out of 3,700 presentations. It's a little bit of a commitment for me, as it is for most to all of you. From this man, I learned this by reading an article in 1976. Everyone is born creative, or at least with creative potential. He found that out by the little photograph in the bottom right when he had a project, a grant project to study ace pilots and survival techniques so he could teach military people to survive. He's in an igloo. But one thing he found out trying to help create ways of training pilots to be ace pilots was the only thing ace pilots had in common was they were creative. They were willing to do anything. And they also accepted the fact when they lifted off, they might be dead. But they were going to do everything they could to get back. He discovered that that's not necessarily something you can train. You can train awareness of it. But he got hooked on creativity like J.P. Guilford had become. And he devoted the rest of his life until the day he died. Heinz, his father, and I were there just a few days before. Bonnie Crammon was there that day because she was there with him every day at the end. His body wouldn't work, but his mind still did because we were communicating with him right to the end. He brought me into this, and over the last 30-some years, that I live life creatively every day, even the days that feel like you fill in the blank. Those days happen. But I will find some way that day to be creative, if it's only to make it to the next day. He also taught me, along with many people like yourselves, over the last 30 years to do this, to reinvent, to redesign, to recreate, to rediscover who I am, who I have been, who I want or choose to be. I encourage you all to do that throughout your lives, daily, weekly, yearly. The giants that we praise, the giants we put up on platforms, are the ones who are always creative to the day they die. Michelangelo was still working on sculpture until a week before he died. Matisse was almost completely blind, so he had assistants help him. He cut out shapes because he could no longer, with arthritis, use his hands, and created some of the finest work he ever created. Some of them created their best work in the last couple years. What if they had given up earlier? Here's an example of me wandering around the world, which is my handle, my nickname, Wandering Alan, to many of the conferences. The South African one has become my second home. It's where my heart comes out most of the time because of my clients that I used to chase after, like some of you still chase after, and I hope you make it. I hope you really help them. But I walked away from corporate world years ago, except when I feel they truly want it. Because I don't want to be speaker du jour. It's a waste of my life. When I wake up in the morning, I have a reason for being awake. And my reason is to help. One of the kindest comments ever given to me by Ed Wiseman when I was handed the DSL award at SIPSI, which is supposedly the highest you can get other than the Hall of Fame, and because I'm a rebel, I doubt I will get there. But the DSL, the members vote on you. But Eddie got up there and he stood and he says, this person travels all over the world. Of course, then I knew what he meant, who he meant, because it was supposed to be secretive. But he says the one thing that's always impressed me about him, when I call him, the first thing he says, how can I help you? And there's an example of one of my holiday cards. If you would like to receive one electronically next year, just let me know your email address. I stopped helping the post office years ago. But this is a question I ask you. How did I get there? How did you get where you are? Through mentors and heroes, through friends, through clients, through people who challenge you, even those clients I didn't respect. But I loved their employees, but I didn't respect the managers. So I didn't get hired back, but I got hugs from the people that came to my programs. Here are some of mine from Gordon McKenzie, who I heard at an Innovation Network meeting. And as soon as he stopped speaking at his keynote lunch, I stood up and walked up to him, and he came off the stage and we hugged. And I have never hugged a man like I hugged him. We were like soul brothers. We kept in touch for about a year and a half, and unfortunately he died from 3 forms of cancer. He worked exactly 30 days for Hallmark cards. And if you want to read a book on creativity from the inside of corporation, read Orbiting the Giant Hairball. I have a handmade, hand-signed copy that he gave me in exchange for my little tiny crayon book and a big hug. Some of the others are advertising people. Of course, Charlie Schultz from Peanuts. I'm not necessarily a great fan of Steve Jobs, but he's accomplished a lot. But Jimmy Carter, I spent a week building houses for people in Cambodia because I respect this man for what he does now. Mavericks, all of them in their own way. But the key thing for them, and this is what I encourage you in the transformational focus of many of the talks this week, find the meaning. Man's search for meaning. Viktor Frankl taught us that after being in 3 separate prison camps. He knew he had done some horrible things to survive, but what he learned was those who survived had a meaning for their life. They had a purpose. And if it was just to get out alive and see their family again, it was enough to keep them alive. But take it further than that, as Sir boy, that sounds weird. Sir Kenneth Robinson, who has become famous over the YouTube and because of his TED Talk. He's written a book I highly recommend called The Element. But he doesn't talk about Edison, Da Vinci, Disney, no slight in any manner, shape, or form. He talks about people today. Mick Fleetwood, and some politicians and some other people. He says they didn't really do their best work until they found the element. What was it about them? And John, I think you're looking for the element. What we talked about today. Oh, there's a few books on my shelves that are creativity-focused books. I ask you this, what are you reading? What have you bought to take home with you? I don't even know how much I spent. I just put it on the credit card. I'll probably regret it when I get the bill. And I already have 70-some books that I bought since November that I've read 19 of them so far. And I've lost the motivation to read for a while, so hopefully I'll read some that I bought. But the key thing is, I met the people who wrote them. They're more valuable to me. Or have you read? My house is built of books. It's a tree house of books, is what I call it. It wasn't intended to be a tree house, but I learned by mistake 20 years after I planted the trees that they get bigger. And all of a sudden, my house is surrounded by trees. My neighbors say, oh, yours is that damn house you can't see for all the trees. But it's held up by my books. Or have you written? Heinz's father, Cobus, my good friend, fellow graduate student with Dr. Torrance, fellow loving friend of Dr. Torrance, but we didn't meet until 10 years later, because I didn't want to meet just other students. I was too busy being a teacher. But I met him 10 years ago, and he honored me by asking Mary and I to come to South Africa. Had to wait a couple years, but I've been there 12 years in a row, and I will go until someone throws my dust in the air. Everyone is born creative, as I said before, but what happens in most cultures? Only certain people get recognized. We only think that being a fine artist, a fine musician, a dancer, a poet, that's what it means to be creative. Ask the people. Go out on the street, on the square, or along any of the roads leading away from the hotel, and ask the next 100 people, do you think you're creative? And most of them will say, no, I can't draw. I didn't ask you if you could draw, I asked if you were creative. Because Walt Disney didn't draw very well. That wasn't his job. His job was create and sell it. Conceive it, create it, sell it. And then hire the best artists he could find. And if they weren't as good as he thought they were, he helped make them better than they dreamed they could be. We had a slogan or a theme for the conference that some of the presenters used in their presentations. This is like the Grand Canyon. Actually, it's a photograph of the canyon in eastern South Africa, near where the gold was originally found. GAPS. But thanks to my experiences at SIPSI, I created this acronym of GAPS as what I call the creative gaps. Of why people aren't as creative as they really are, is too many people think it's a gift that only some people get. Like a Van Gogh. Van Gogh didn't draw. You know how long he spent drawing and painting all those drawings and paintings? Less than 10 years. He had never really picked up a pencil until he started drawing out of depression when he was trying to be a minister in southern France. But he did more drawings and more paintings than any other artist in the history of the world in those 10 years. Sold one, ended up buying it back, but one of his paintings will sell for more than Manet's collection. Hey, Sarah. It's also attitude. This is one of the things many of us focus on, trying to help managers, leaders, supervisors, or us, or everyday people. In a positive environment, people are creative. You can be creative in a threatening environment. I don't recommend it. But I think of that painting by Munch from Denmark, The Scream. He was depressed most of his life. I overheard the one presentation about patience a little bit because I was photographing sessions and then having individual sessions with good friends, which is another reason why we come here, like Jamie said. And didn't hear the whole presentation, but he talked about one of my heroes, Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe fought with depression most of his life. O. Henry, one of the writers I have as a hero, only wrote when he was in prison. And after he served his time, they found out he didn't do it. And he never wrote again. The fourth that many of us work on is process. Every single thing a human being does is the result of a process of some kind, whether it's subconscious or conscious, known or not. And last, it's a strategy. And what are strategies? Choice. You choose to be creative. when you get up. Will you be as creative every single day just because you chose to be creative? No, no one knows the magic of it. If the principle of the muse is really true, I want to know where this sucker is, because half the time he's never been where I wanted him to be, or her. One of the things I learned from SIPSI the very first time I went there are things called creative thinking tools. My God, where were those? Why didn't they teach me that? And my life became changed because I've been collecting or creating them for 30 years. But when are the tools used? When you do not feel creative. I don't recommend some of the chemicals that Brock used and some of the other things, or some of the later artists of today, but there are all kinds of processes, and many of you presented excellent examples of that in your presentations these last couple days. I need one volunteer from each table to stand up. That's all you have to do is stand up. Someone at each table, please stand up. All right, we got there, we got there, we got, all right, very good. First of all, a round of applause for these people. Now, if these people will raise their right hands, either one of them. If you're left-handed, it's still a right hand. Wave it around, loosen it up. Now point at the person you would rather have make a total fool out of themselves in the next couple minutes. Point at the real volunteer. 1, 2, 3, point. Not me. At your table. I wasn't specific. Once again, ACA comes back to haunt me. Pick someone at your table. Those 7 people come up front. Or 6 people, actually. 6. Take a bag of your choice. Color or non-color or all color. All right. Pick one of your own choice. All right. And we got one more coming. Now, in the bag is the exercise for everybody to do and the tools to use to do it. You go pass them out, or let them take them. It's up to you. Take them back to your table, and either pass them around or let them take them out of the bag. All right. In 1980, partly in honor of J.P. Guilford, who I had met 2 years before, I did a self-directed learning exercise. Actually, after my first year, I stopped taking real classes, and my classes were all self-motivated, all that Paul Torrance demanded, that I had something to prove that I'd learned something. So what he referred to as the European approach, you don't just take a bunch of classes, you go off and learn something, and when you feel you've learned it, then you pick someone to test you. So my assignment was, my fantasy was in my early 30s, that I would come up with the 7 habits of highly creative people. The success one hadn't come out yet. You need one more? Oh, we have plenty of these. No problem.
Thank you.
Okay. And did you get one of the crayons out of the bottom of the bag? There are crayons in the bottom of the bag. Okay.
Oh, do I need stuff?
I painstakingly collated all this.
Take something, so she took
That's true. Once again, ACA came back to haunt me. Anyway, I set up a study from 1950, honoring J.P. Guilford, to 1980, when I was actually doing a study, a 30-year period. I chose 2 educational journals and 2 psychological journals, and I looked for articles that talked about the traits of creative people. Today, this could be done in microseconds, using Google, even using Wikipedia, which I wouldn't trust the writers on Wikipedia to carry water across the room. But it's interesting to read what they think is correct. Anyway, my goal was to find the traits of creative people so I could write the book. I ended up with a chart that was about as long as this wall. It ran from the front door of our university apartment all the way into the front wall with the glass. It had 147 noted authorities vertically and 460 some traits. Like the Hawthorne effect, like some other research of the past, I thought I had failed. But I learned later, when you work on a doctorate, you don't have to succeed. You just have to understand what happened. If you write about what you screwed up because you learned, that's just as good as writing if you were successful. It's the process they're after. So I finally, after several days of being painfully depressed by walking by this thing every day, I finally got a hunch. There must be a pattern here somewhere. And the pattern I found were these 32. These 32 were highlighted by at least 5 experts around the world. Now, highly scientific, no, because it wasn't always the same 5 experts. And besides, it's kind of an arbitrary research. But I've taken this around the world now since 1980, that's 30 years, and had over 300,000 people fill this out. And the goal is, if you got 5 or more of these, there's a good chance you're a lot more creative than you thought. And my focus the last 12 years has been trying to connect organizations and people around the world so that we can unite to do something of value and stop just trying to be the next so-and-so who sells millions of books. People, process, product, place, many organizations. This one is a professional organization. Others are training organizations. I'm not sure really what they are, but they hold conferences. But this is what my friend Tara Coast and I, after my bugging them after my first trip around the world, and they asked me to be the international connector for ACA, and we created some sources on the website. From that came this, IFCO or IFCO. Unfortunately, IFCO was not available for a domain name, so we got the extra O in there.
International Forum of Creativity.
Okay, all right, you got away with it. All right. Here's the entrance page with the many options you have on the left-hand side. If you click on events, we have the 2009 and 2010, and sometime around October, November, we'll probably be putting the 2000, what's this we, white man? She will be putting them on. I will be feeding ones I know, but she's the master on the website. But there's the example of the events page starting with A through or in calendar order. And then there are paragraphs or multiple paragraphs or links to websites for all these conferences, hundreds of them that we've collected. Every one in the world? No, but an awful lot of them. Also, another wonderful part of section that you created is contacts on the 6 continents. And if you go to North America, guess who you find? Tara Coast and me. There it is again. Write it down. As a couple of you asked me about this international thing, we've been doing this for years. And we've been doing it in every presentation that we can do at every conference to tell the people about it. Unfortunately, people are using it. The website's visited a lot. It's the internet exchange group that we have that has not worked yet. May not be the right media. Creativity is the function for all of us. And here's the final thing for me. It took me most of my 30 years to finally find what I'm really after. My tagline is, you marketing-focused people, you brand-focused people say, my goal is to spread creativity, creative thinking throughout entire workplaces from the front door to the top floor in every single employee. Will I ever accomplish it? Probably not. I've had a lot of success with police departments, not with everybody, but a good portion of them. But that's not my goal. My goal is to just keep trying. That's all that matters. Support it. We don't usually support it. We need to promote it. We need to recognize it. We need to reward it. We need to encourage it. We need to educate it. We need to apply it. Every single employee can be more creative on any given day. And you know, when their creativity rises, their motivation rises. The quality of their work rises. The productivity rises. And that's been shown many times. And developing it, like coming to ACA. How do I do it? How do most of you do it? Through workshops, through training programs, through university courses, through writing books and articles or blogs or tweets, keynotes at creativity associations or any association, and just outright consulting. Keep doing the good work, folks. Here's one of the ways I've been doing for 14 years, my creating challenges. I choose a theme, and every week I write, how can you improve your creativity 15 minutes a day? And there are almost 800 or 900 of them now. And Rolf is one of my truest fans. The one I sent out this week was this one. Once again, the Zen of presentation people would be slapping me silly for this slide. But I said on this one, I'll read a little bit of it and break the rules. In 30 years, what I've discovered is that people who are creative or think creatively simply are or choose to be. Those who are not or do not believe they are, aren't. Yet, when they were young children, they were naturally creative until they or someone else told them that either they were not, or that it was not a good idea to be creative or to think creatively. Instead, get in line. Do what you're supposed to do. Find your line and get into it. This week, and this is what I do, is I provoke something each day, one was to use your imagination, the other one, and so forth. Take a look. Many things on the website. That's a sampling of how many there were over the last 7 years. I usually send out one a week. Sometimes I slip a few extras in. But like I started, creativity a gift at birth, yet it needs to be a daily choice. One of the lessons I learned from one of my heroes, not as a person, but as what he was committed to, was Lloyd Wright. Many highly creative people have ups and downs, good times and bad times. Many of us are going through. One person I became aware of this week, I kind of had a sense of his case. He's an ACA member, very devoted to ACA. He was the kind that was a very committed, very zealous kind of person, and I saw most of the time when people saw him, they walked the other way, which is sad. As Ed knows, he has so much to give, so much to give. But most of us can't stand to be around zealots. People couldn't stand to be around Vincent van Gogh because he was a zealot. He passionately believed in what he was doing. I wanted to meet, finally, Eric Meisel, who started the field of coaching of creativeness. He's written several books, an excellent one that came out last year called The Van Gogh Blues. And the basic premise is, he's talking about highly creatives, but he uses the generic term creative. He's talking about highly creatives. When they lose their vision, they lose their mission, they lose their purpose, they lose their creativity. Until someone helps them find it again or find it anew, they will never create again. Lloyd Wright's career went like this. He was famous, he was a bum. He became famous, he was a bum. He somehow got a building, the Tokyo Hotel in Tokyo, and it was the only building after the earthquake hit that was still standing. He became famous again. No, just pure luck. But in 1932, he designed this house, Falling Water. He was 60 years old, and his career only went up from there. I'm 65. I guess I'm looking for my falling water. Maybe this was it. Back to the canyon. It's up to you. In reality, it's up to us. Creativity.
When the